The past month of the Trump presidency gives an impression of chaos. But is there a method to the madness? What do the actions of the new administration reveal about its ultimate goal? Why does it increasingly seem that Iran and China have everything to do with it? What should you be doing with your money right now? Trump seems to be picking a fight with everyone these days, including allies, especially allies. This week, Trump announced a 25% tariff on all imported cars that will disproportionately hit traditional US allies like South Korea, Canada, Japan, and Germany. There was also the story of the signal leak involving major Trump cabinet members. What their messages to each other revealed is a total disdain for Europe. J.D. Vance wrote in the chat that the planned attack on Yemen was another build-out of Europe. Pete Hegseth replied that he fully shares Vance's loathing of European freeloading, calling it pathetic. Mike Waltz suggested that he was working with the Pentagon and State Department to determine how to compile the costs associated with the attack and levy them on the Europeans. Whether Europe deserves the contempt of the new US administration or not, the Trump team is leaving little doubt that it thinks of Europe as a liability. Adding insult to injury, Trump is busy repairing ties with Russia that Europe views as a grave threat. Steve Witkoff, Trump's Ukraine and Middle East envoy, sparked an outcry in Europe last week when he defended Putin's annexation of the 5 Ukrainian oblasts and said that he didn't see that Putin wants to take all of Ukraine. More tellingly, the US committed itself this week to lifting sanctions on Russian agriculture and fertilizer exports in exchange for Moscow's agreement to a 30-day ceasefire in the Black Sea. While Trump's general overture to Putin could be understood as negotiating tactics, this clear concession by Trump makes me think there is something more going on. By now, it should be clear to Trump that even he cannot stop the Ukraine war so easily. So why is he in such a rush to sell Ukraine down the river? There can be only 2 plausible explanations. Maybe both are true. One plausible explanation is Iran. The clock is ticking with Iran. Anthony Cotton, head of US Strategic Command, told the Senate Armed Services Committee this week that Iran has reduced its breakout time, the period needed to enrich enough uranium for one bomb, from 10 to 15 days to presumably less than 1 week. Trump may be running out of time to stop Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. And it is doubtful that there's anything that Trump could offer Tehran so close to the nuclear threshold to give up its nuclear weapons program voluntarily. This leaves a military strike as the only viable option left on the table. If Trump is seriously considering an attack on the Iranian nuclear weapons program, he would want to avoid provoking the Russians. Putin is still licking his wounds over the fall of the Assad regime in Syria, that some say Washington had a hand in behind the scenes. Putin may see an attack on Iran, an ally and a major arms supplier to Russia, as an attack on Russia, and respond accordingly. To prevent this, Trump would want to assure Putin that he has no intention to topple the Iranian regime or weaken Russia. I think this could explain what seems like a disproportionately generous concession that Trump just made to Putin over a very limited ceasefire deal. Trump needs to win Putin's trust. He needs to make sure that Russia does not overreact to a US or an Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear weapons program, and that Russia does not lend a hand to Iran to cross the nuclear threshold. This, together with the massive US strikes against the Houthis in Yemen over the past 2 weeks, is why I think we're getting closer to an attack on Iran. J.D. Vance's comments on Signal suggest he may not be in the loop. But open source intelligence reports yesterday that a number of B-2 stealth bombers and C-17 transport aircraft have either arrived at or en route to Diego Garcia, a joint UK-US base that has long served as a launch point for major U.S. military campaigns in the Middle East, including operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. All else being equal, this should be seen as bullish for oil. Another plausible explanation of Trump's aggressive overture to Russia is that he wants to pull Russia away from China. Some commentators have gone so far as suggesting that Trump is doing a reverse Nixon. Nixon's famous foreign policy achievement was driving a wedge between China and the Soviet Union. But the situation today and 50 years ago cannot be any more different. From the late 1950s onward, China and the Soviet Union were drifting apart ideologically and politically. Things got so bad between the two countries that in 1969, the Soviets seriously considered launching a nuclear strike on China, including Beijing, in a border war. By 1970, China's door was wide open for new friends. All Nixon had to do was to get on the plane. 50 years later, the relations between China and Russia, underpinned by economic synergy, military partnership, and technological cooperation, have never been stronger. It won't be a walk in the park, even for Trump, to weaken the alliance, at least under the current Chinese and Russian leadership. That said, I'm becoming more and more convinced that China has everything to do with Trump's retreat from Europe. Just like the Iraq War that diverted U.S. attention from China, the same could be said about the Ukraine war that has been draining American resources. If Trump is in a hurry to end the war in Ukraine, it is because he wants to focus on China. Last week, BYD unveiled a new supercharger that can fill up a car in just 5 minutes, twice as fast as the newest Tesla supercharger. The news came less than 2 months after DeepSeek made headlines, narrowing the AI race between the US and China. While Boeing struggles with safety issues and strikes, the Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China plans to double the production of its C919 passenger planes this year. I think the DeepSeek news in particular has tilted the balance of influence in favor of China hawks inside the Trump administration like Marco Rubio over the China doves like Elon Musk. It could explain why US-China relations seem to have been steadily going downhill ever since Trump tweeted that he had a good phone call with Xi Jinping 2 days before his inauguration. The US has imposed an additional 20% tariff on all Chinese imports since Trump took office. Earlier this week, the Commerce Department added 80 entities to its sanction list to prevent China from acquiring and developing high-performance and exascale computer capabilities, as well as quantum technologies for military applications. Exascale computing is the latest supercomputer technology enabling the next phase of AI development. Even the negotiation over TikTok seems to be stuck. In another sign that Elon Musk is losing out to China hawks in the military-industrial complex, Trump decided this week to move forward with the F-47, the sixth-generation fighter jet. Elon Musk had been railing against the F-35 and advocated for unmanned drone swarms as a cheaper, more effective alternative. Boeing, which lost $12 billion in 2024, was chosen to build the new fighter. Is it possible that the decision was a desperate attempt to prop up what used to be America's manufacturing crown jewel before Chinese competition catches up with it? You can decide for yourself. China is the biggest competitive threat to the US economic hegemony. Trump understands that for the US to compete with China, he needs to bring the US runaway debt under control, revive American manufacturing, and allow meritocracy and entrepreneurship to do their magic. But these things take time. Impatience is not Trump's virtue. And it is not helping that Trump's deportation drive and spending cuts are stuck in court battles. As the economy slows and his approval rating drops, I think the power and the influence of the China hawks around him will only increase. Last week I said that I was bearish about Chinese stocks, especially after the big rally that they have had. I'm starting to think that the RMB is likewise vulnerable. China had kept a firm grip on the RMB to avoid waving a red flag in Trump's face. If things keep going the way they are, Beijing might decide that the upside of having a weaker RMB is greater than the downside. Thank you for listening.